Shabbat Shalom.
After a week in which the weather has been questionable at best locally, we come to Friday, we come to Shabbat, wanting to do a service outside, and we have this beautiful weather for this beautiful setting. And it's so nice to be able to be outside in nature for Shabbat. And in many ways, as we celebrate Kabbalat Shabbat, the receiving of Shabbat, the beginning of Shabbat, being outside feels so appropriate because that was the original way that Kabbalat Shabbat was once upon done. In the mountains of Tzfat, the Kabbalists would go out into nature to welcome Shabbat, and they would essentially greet Shabbat and walk it back into town where they would then begin their Shabbat celebrations. And so to be outside in that way, to listen to the sound of the wind in the trees and nature around us feels like a really wonderful way for us to enter into this space of Shabbat on this special long weekend for America. And so together as we enter into Shabbat, let's all take a neshima amulka, a deep breath, to enter into this space. So we breathe in together to let go of the week that has been. And we breathe out. And to enter into this space truly, and this day, and this time, and this moment, we breathe in again. And we breathe out. And so for those of you watching at home, and for those of you who are here with us under the canopy, we hope you'll be joining in with our prayers and our songs. And my microphone is now switched on, which is even better. Yeah, I have a voice where I never know whether I'm switched on or off on the microphone, but there we go. So we will continue with the microphone now working as we'll sing together the words of Shalom Aleichem as we welcome the Shabbat angels into this space. You'll find the prayer on page 24 in your Siddurim, in your prayer books.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Yasharet, Malachei Yasharet, Malachei Elyon, Li Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Aleichem L'Shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei, Malachei Elyon, Li Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni, Barchuni L'Shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Li Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
So as we turn back in our prayer books, back in our Siddurim, page 2, as we prepare to light the Shabbat candles, and as is my way when we don't have a Bar Mitzvah, I'm going to just call on someone. So Karen, if you'll do us the honor of lighting the Shabbat candles for us this Shabbat. No, you don't. And Cantor Hollis will recite the prayer for us, but wonderful to have you lighting the candles for us. Yes. The lighting sometimes works. Outdoors, it's never clear whether they stay lit for the whole service, but we will hope.
Just being a little different. Trying things.
One. We'll try for symbolic lighting. Yeah,
We got some time.
it's Shabbat. We've got all the time that we need.
I wasn't a smoker,
No.
you all know.
We'll give it one more try to just have them
And then
lit
we'll
for a
call
moment,
it,
and we can
we'll
always
call
say
them
that.
spiritually lit.
Spiritually
Oof.
lit. Oh.
Yes. Oof. Oh, wait.
Yeah, that
and
one's lit?
Yes. Hey, it's the Shabbos miracle.
We'll welcome them in as Karen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
So we'll consider that the beta testing of lighting Shabbat candles outdoors for the summer months. Karen, thank you for endeavoring with us and
Last week was great.
symbolically lighting our candles, and we will find a way to make sure that for next Shabbat, that John's already thinking about a solution. I can see in his face he's trying to work out how can we have candles that we stay lit. We might have to get electric ones, or we'll find ones in a glass. We'll find those
With the things, with that.
We will
Yeah, we can do
explore. If
Some
you
of those,
have a
like,
solution,
those,
if you're
quick
at home or in
candles.
person, let us know, and we
Any
will.
engineers in the house?
Yes,
We're going to
and,
work on
a few
this.
actually in the house. So
You're on.
a challenge for next Shabbat. We will by next Shabbat we'll have a solution. So with that,
Accepting all ideas.
Yes, we turn to page 20 in our Siddurim, having entered into the space, having welcomed the Shabbat angels, we now prepare to welcome the Shabbat bride as we'll sing together Lachad Odi, and we'll sing together the 1st, 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 9th verses. And when we come to that final verse, when we're outside in the space, we symbolically face towards the direction from which we entered, where we imagine the bride will be entering. And so we'll rise and face towards the back to welcome the Shabbat bride into the space with the words of Lachad Odi on page 20.
Lechad Odi likrat kala, yai babai babai, yai bai bai. Penei Shabbat nekabelha, yai babai babai, yai bai. Oh shamoy v'zachor b'dibor echad, yishmi'anu el hamiuchad Adonai echad, u'shmo echad, l'shem u'tiferet ve'itila. Lechad Odi likrat kala, yai ba 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 ba, yai bai bai. Penei Shabbat nekabelha, yai ba 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 ba, yai bai. Oh, likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor habracha merosh mikedem nesucha. Sof maaseh b'machshava techila, lechad Odi likrat kala, yai ba 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 ba, yai bai bai. Penei Shabbat nekabelha, yai ba 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 ba, yai bai. Oh, hitoreri, ki v'harech kumi uri, shir dameri, kivod Adonai alayach nikam. Lechad Odi likrat kala, yai ba 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 ba, yai bai bai. Penei Shabbat nekabelha, yai ba 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 ba, yai bai. Oh, yamin u'smol tifrotzi, ve'et Adonai taritzi, al yadish bein par Ay, bye, 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 bye. Oh, boi vishalom, materet bala, gam besimcha uvtzola, tuchemunei am sigula, boi chala, lecha dodi likrat kala, bye 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 bye, penei Shabbat mekabela, bye 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 bye.
Having welcomed the Shabbat bride, we now take a moment to welcome one another. So if you can find someone under the canopy that you haven't met before, say hello, introduce yourselves, get to know one another, share life stories. Shabbat Shalom to those of you in Miami, in Saratoga, in London, Carlisle, Maine, wherever you might be joining us. We wish you a Shabbat Shalom.
Rachel, Shabbat Shalom.
So if you'll please be seated as we turn together now to page 26 in our Siddurim and continue with the Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkadash Shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Bel ma divrach ruti v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uv'yomechon u'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael bagala bagala u'vizman kariv v'himeru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam olam me'almaiha yitbarach yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shemei dekudisha brichu Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata damiran me'alma v'yimeru Amen.
On page 28, we rise in body or in spirit, facing towards the east, which is in that direction, for the Baruch Hu, our call to prayer.
Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Le'olam va'ed. Yadadai, dai, dai, dai,
Please be seated. On page 31, we read together at the top of the page, Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, You set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows.
Baruch atah Adonai, Hamariv Aravim.
On page 32, Ahavat Olam.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, Bishoch beinu v'kumeinu, Nasiach beruchetecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'b'mitzvotecha, le'olam ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta. Ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta.
Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Page 34.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, bechol levavecha u'bechol nafshecha u'bechol meodecha, ve'hayu hadavarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha, veshinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha, uv'lechtecha v'derech, uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha, ug'shartam lehot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot beinenecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha leman tiskeru ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת.
As we turn to page 40 in our Siddurim, the arrangement of Ahavat Olam was a new one for our community in that regard, to hear something new with these words that we say each and every Shabbat. And at this point with Micha Mocha, we have words that were said thousands of years ago for the first time, and yet we say them on a daily basis twice a day. And in this way, with our prayers, there's an echo of generations who were here before. There's an amazing connection in the way that the liturgy is born and reborn again and again and again, from generation to generation. Ancient words, new melodies, ancient melodies, all mixing together to elevate our souls and to answer the needs of the moment. And I think that's the amazing thing about the Micha Mocha on page 40. A song that's sung in celebration of freedom was relevant at the time of crossing over the sea to the other side and is just as relevant today. And so as we join in these words, we feel that link back to generations past with the current generation and also with generations yet to be. Micha Mocha on page 40.
Micha Mocha Bailim Adonai, Micha Mocha Bedar BaKodesh, Norati Lod, O Sefela, Micha Mocha Bailim Adonai, Malechut Icharuvanecha, Bokei Ayam Lifnei Moshe Miriam, Ze'anu ve'amru, Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. Micha Mocha Bailim Adonai, Micha Mocha Nedar BaKodesh, Norati Lod, O Sefela, Micha Mocha Bailim Adonai.
We continue with Hashkivenu, our prayer for the evening, on page 42.
Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, ve'hamidenu shomrenu l'chaim, l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, ve'hamidenu shomrenu l'chaim, l'chaim. Uthros aleinu sukkot shlomecha, Uthros aleinu sukkot shlomecha. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, ve'hamidenu shomrenu l'chaim, l'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai haporech sukat shalom aleinu va'akol amo Yisrael va'al Yerushalayim. We turn together now to page 46, rising in body or in spirit, and once again facing towards the east for the Amidah, our standing prayer.
Open my eyes to truth, open my hands to give freely, open my lips to good words, to pure words, open my heart to love. Open my eyes to truth, open my hands to give freely, open my lips to good words, to pure words, open my heart to love. Adonai sifatai tiftach, ufi hagi tehilatecha. Open my lips to good words, to pure words, open my heart to love. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'Neihem, Liman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Vezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim atah Rav Lehoshia, Marid Hatal, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayei Metim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofech Oholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emrunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Gevurot, Umido Melach, Melech Meimit Umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'nehman atah lehachayot mehitim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei hametim. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kedoshim b'chol yom yihallelu Selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el ha'kadosh.
We continue silently now with our own private Amidah, using the words of the Siddur, or the words of your own heart. Please be seated at the conclusion of your prayers.
Say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
As we turn to page 253 in our Siddurim, in our prayer books, we know that while Shabbat is a day of joy and celebration, there are those amongst us who are suffering, those in need of healing of the mind, body, soul, or spirit. And so we take a moment now to think of those in need of healing and share these names. Abba Noach ben Yehudit, Eliza Dorfman, Avivia Sigalit bat Devora, Barbara Lanzert, Barbara Ziman, David Feldman, Diane McCaslin, Dina Lutin, Emma Held, Ethan Kadish, Gemma Rose Nicoletti, Harav Nechama bat Yaakov Vernice, James Nicoletti, Jeremy Pivor, Julian Arce, Karen Gordon, Leah bat Fagler, Lily Stander, Lisa Shapiro, Mark Lampert, Meir Abba ben Ruvain, Moshe Yoel ben Esther Avraham, Nechama bat Trainer Raziel, Pam Ross, Peter Gross, Robert Friedman, Ron Abramson, Sam Goldenberg, Sarah Fager bat Malka, Sarit Liat bat Panina Sarah, Stephen Rose, Susan Hoyer, Susan Scheller, Tyson Batinus, Yosef Ben Gittel, Catherine Giles, Margaret Sweeney, Susan Stone, Bernice Slater, Elizabeth Day, Malkiel Shlomo HaKohen, Ben Rivka Yehuda Leib, Ari Khan, Rochelle Leah Bat Golda, Declan Alexander Kenny, Stephen Krasner, Pinchas Aaron Ben Shalom Mordechai Vesara Leah, Motel Lieber Bas Bes, Mark Volk, Yehuda Aryeh Ben Moshe Mordechai, Sheldon Zimmerman, Yitzchak Ben Gershon Veneta, Charlie Carroll, Herbert Levine, Valerie Kenny, and Sylvia Wolfson. If there are other names you're thinking of in need of healing, please share their names as I look around the room.
Kate Hendricks.
We join together in offering this prayer of healing.
Mi sheberach avotenu v'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarach et hacholim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yamalei rachamim aleihem, lecha chalimam u'rapotam u'lecha chazikam, v'yishlach lahem mehira refuah, refuah shlema min hashamayim, refuat hanefesh u'refuat haguf, hashta b'galav b'zman kariv, v'nomar Amen.
There is a Jewish saying that people plan and God laughs. On road trips, I think a more accurate comment might be that people plan and children's bladders laugh. Monday, driving back from Baltimore to Natick, we had plans for that road trip. We had intentions about where we would be stopping and when we would be stopping to allow for lunch and a restroom break. But our children had other ideas. As it turned out, over those 9 hours, all of our stops were impromptu because one or other or both of the children needed to use a restroom. Most of the time on the journey, we got a certain amount of notice with a warning that we should stop soon for facilities. But on occasion, as I'm sure everyone knows, it's suddenly urgent, and you have to find a stop immediately. Driving through Connecticut, we had one of those moments where it was suddenly urgent. So we pulled off the highway, and at that stop, there happened to be a Sheraton hotel. As we pulled into the parking lot, Gabby, our daughter, was anxious. We weren't staying at that hotel. So what would happen if someone stopped us when we were walking in? Were we really allowed to use the facilities? I had no such hesitation. I walked straight in with both of our children, past the check-in counters on the left and straight towards where I assumed the restrooms would be, behind the bar area to the right. We used the facilities and exited just as we had entered, returning to our car and continuing that unending drive through Connecticut to finally reach Massachusetts. After a couple of experiences on our road trip to North Carolina and this incident at the hotel, I've been reflecting on the way that I am able to walk through the world. I felt completely confident walking into that hotel. I didn't anticipate being challenged, and if I was confident that they would let me use the facilities ultimately. Society is designed for people who look like me, and as such, there is a sense of ease and entitlement when walking through this world. That experience of walking so comfortably into a hotel in which I was not staying, I doubt would have been the same for someone, a Latino person or a person of color in the same situation. If they were walking into a hotel just as I was, I wonder about how far they would get. Would someone challenge them? Would they be aware of the eyes that were watching them that bit more closely, wondering where they were heading? And it's not just the color of my skin. It's also my gender that means that there are other settings and situations where I am treated in a way that is not the same as my wife, and situations where I feel comfortable, safe, and secure while she doesn't. In the body that I inhabit, in the world that we live in, I think it's important to be aware of the rights and privileges that are afforded to me, not as something to feel guilty about, but as something to be conscious of and to work to ensure that everyone is afforded those same rights and privileges that I take so often for granted. As we prepare to celebrate America's birthday, we can see the progress that has been made in these past 247 years. But we can also clearly see that there is a long way to go in fulfilling the words of the Declaration of Independence. Ignoring the gendered language, and with an awareness that their definition of men was not inclusive enough, we can still look back to that document and aspire to the fulfillment of the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, all people, are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Equality and unalienable rights for all. It sounds so simple, but there is clearly still a long way to go. There's a picture that does the rounds on social media every so often, and it shows three people of varying heights trying to watch a baseball game over a fence. There's a tall person, a medium-sized person, and a short person. In the first picture, all three are standing on the same size box. And so while the tallest person and the middle person can see over the fence to watch the game, the smallest one remains too short to be able to become a spectator. The distribution of boxes is equal, but the ability to engage with the game is not. In the second picture, those same three people, tallest, medium, and short, are both standing behind a fence watching the game, but this time, the three boxes are distributed differently. The tallest person doesn't require a box, and so doesn't have one. The medium person still has that same box that they had in the first picture, and the smallest person has two boxes, so that now they can see over the fence and watch the game. Under the first picture, it says equality. Everyone gets a box each. Under the second picture, it says equity. Things might be equal, but it does not mean that they are necessarily equitable. In the second picture, the distribution of resources is such that only then can everyone watch the game, even if they are all receiving a different number of boxes on which they can stand. Equality and equity are not necessarily the same thing. And so on this Shabbat, as we head into our July 4th weekend, I'm sure that many of us have been following the Supreme Court decisions of the last couple of days and the way that they may impact equity and equality. As I aspire for a country in which everyone is afforded the same rights and privileges as me, I am saddened by a ruling that says a web designer can use their religious beliefs as an excuse to refuse to create websites for same-sex weddings. I am saddened by a ruling that overturns years of progress in relation to affirmative action and prevents colleges and universities from taking race into consideration as a specific basis for granting admission. And a year later, I remain saddened that a woman's right to choose the right medical path for herself and her body is no longer protected by the law. It's not simply about equality. It's about equity, so that all people can expect to receive the same rights and freedoms regardless of race, gender, or sexuality. In his book, Discontents and Its Civilizations, Dispatches from Lahore, New York, and London, the author Mohsin Hamid writes, "A country should be judged by how it treats its minorities. To the extent it protects them, it stands for the ennobling of values of empathy and compassion, for justice rooted not in might, but in human equality, and for civilization instead of savagery." We can all individually reflect on how we would judge America on the eve of her 247th birthday. But I want to come to the Torah. In this week's Torah portion, we get one of those lines of text that is so beautiful, so powerful, resonates so much that it gets adopted into our daily liturgy. To give a little bit of background, Balak, the king of Moab, is concerned about the Israelites coming into his territory. And so he calls upon this prophet Balaam, who was known to have special powers because those he blessed were blessed and those he cursed were cursed. There's a lot more to the story that I won't go into, including talking donkeys and invisible angels. If that doesn't whet your appetite, I don't know what will. But ultimately, Balaam stands on a mountain with the intention of cursing the Israelites, but knowing that he can only say what God permits. As an aside, the way that he ignores God and all the signs around him may be the very epitome of white male privilege by an Aramean, but that's a matter for another time. When he stands there on the mountain, he says, "Ma tovu o'alecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael." How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. The rabbis liked this line of Torah so much that it was ultimately adopted into the daily liturgy, and we continue singing it to this very day. And that line offers us an important lesson for this moment. Ma tovu o'alecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. It's a line about progress. There's a beautiful move in that text. We move from tents to dwelling places. But the Hebrew goes deeper because it's not just a dwelling place, it's a mishkan. And the only other mishkan we know is the place where God resides. Progress from tents to dwelling places. And then there's the progress from Jacob to Yisrael. The secondary name he was given, God wrestler, a name he had to earn for himself that wasn't given at birth, but earned through his life. So whenever we sing that line, whenever we recite that word, we're progressing, moving in the very liturgy itself, from tents to dwelling places to a mishkan, from being Jacob to being Israel. The Israelite people always found that way to move forward. The Jewish community has always found that way to move forward. And America has always found that way to move forward. Yes, there may be stumbles along the path. Yes, there may be steps to the side and sometimes even a little bit backwards. But all our stories, Jewish, American, Israelite, are stories of progress towards a promised land, towards realizing a dream that will ultimately be fulfilled. And then there's the secondary unintended message. There's the message of how something that is intended to be negative can be transformed into a positive. Thousands of years ago, Balaam intended to curse the Israelites, and today we're still singing his line as a blessing, as a prayer, as a piece of our liturgy. We might think about how we can take those negatives that we see in our world, in our society, and turn them into positives. If people are refusing to serve members of the LGBTQ plus community on the grounds of their sexuality, we will redouble our efforts to welcome, include, and elevate them within this community, and to support those businesses who recognize that love is love is love is love. If members of the Latino and Black communities need our support, we will know that our history teaches we were slaves in Egypt, and so we will look to support those programs that work in those communities to help with preparing for college applications and broaden access to college acceptance. And it goes without saying that we will never stop fighting to ensure that women have the right to decide on what healthcare is right for them and their bodies, and that no man and no court should have the power to tell them what they can or cannot do in those situations. Balaam intended a negative all those thousands of years ago, but today his words are a positive. Perhaps in years from now, some of the decisions and directions of our country will be recognized not for the moment and how they were received now, but for the way that people reacted and responded to turn a negative into a positive, to continue on the journey that we're on as Jews and Americans towards the promised land. As we approach July 4th, we can hear the words of President Ronald Reagan. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States, where men were free. As we approach America's 247th birthday, recognizing the call that we have as members of the Jewish community, we might all reflect on not just how we're going to celebrate, but what are we going to do to fight and protect America as we approach this day of celebration. Shabbat Shalom. As we return to our prayer books, we turn to page 282. We rise together in body or in spirit, once again facing towards the east for the words of Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים
ומשתחווים ומודים
לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא לתקן עולם במלכות שדי ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
As we turn face in towards the community, creating a community of comfort and support, we turn in our Siddurim, in our prayer books, to page 294 and our Mourner's Kaddish. And we remember our loved ones. On the anniversary of their deaths, we remember George Abrich, Rose Adelson, Murray Bernstein, Henry Chazen, Alfredo De Lucio, Solomon Field, Ruth Goldweitz, Charlotte Goose, Florence Gross, Donald Kay, Barton Kramer, Leah Claire Mazur, Eric Metzger, Barbara Newman, Selma Roblin, Bernice Rothstein, Moses Roseman, Bernard Rubin. And during Shloshim, during the month of memory, we remember William Vodyansky, the father of Irina Boverman, Charlotte Michelson Frank, the grandmother of Jane Murphy and Gail Karp, Laura Marie Kaplan, the sister-in-law of Jenny Kaplan, and Dr. Moise Shems, the father of Joyce Sharon. If there are other names that people are remembering, please share them now as I look around the room. For all those we name out loud and for those we name in our hearts, we say together, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach yirutei ve'amlich malchutei. B'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael. B'galal v'zman kariv ve'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mavarach le'olam u'mei al-maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'a v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitada v'yitalei v'yitalal shmei dikudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata, dam iran ba'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories always be for a blessing, and together let us say, amen. If you'll please be seated. Just a few announcements. So join us next week to see if we can get the candles to stay lit in Shabbat services as we aspire to be staying outside. Next week, just to let you know, it's as it's July 7th, it's the first Friday of the month. So we will be having, as always, our Shabbat Yeladim at 5 o'clock for our youngest families, pizza at 5:30, and then a service at 6:15, ideally under the canopy, weather permitting, and via the live stream as well. And we are welcoming Lexi Weekly, who was our song leader in our Hineni program, back next week and the week after to help lead our service. Going backwards, tomorrow morning minion at 8:30 a.m., Torah study at 9:30 a.m. with a bagel breakfast. We hope you'll be joining us. Remember, TST is closed on the 3rd and the 4th in celebration of July 4th. Young Family Summer Fun, also known as Summer Yeladim, is back. You can register for any of the 5 Thursday morning sessions which we have with our clergy and education team. The first session is Outdoor Fun with me on Thursday, July 13th. We are welcoming our new CBT families. There's a coffee that I'm hosting on Wednesday, July 12th at 1:30. Please do register online, and there'll be some other coffees to welcome people in, to engage and include everyone in the community. More mid-July programming. ACE's bi-weekly Mahjong continues on Thursday the 13th. Men's monthly coffee on Friday the 14th. And on Friday the 14th, we also have a Kabbalat Shabbat and community barbecue at 7:15 p.m. The barbecue straight after services. Registration for the Mahjong and barbecue are online. Men's coffee, you don't have to register, just show up. And last but not least, we do have a Europe trip taking place next year, and there's an information session on Sunday, July 16th at 9 a.m. via Zoom in the morning. Everything is available via the Temple Shir Tikva calendar and on the website, so we hope you'll join us there. Thank you to Susan DeSelms for our beautiful music in the service with Cantor Hollis. Thank you to John for all his tech support throughout. Thank you to all of you for joining us. I'm going to invite Julia to come up and help Cantor Hollis and I as we lead Kiddush. And so we're going to rise together in body or in spirit for the Kiddush that you'll find on page 4 or 5. I can't remember.
Julia, you want to hold that up for us? Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshana b'mitzvotav v'ratzava v'reishit ki hu yom tehillah limnikrai kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim ki vanu v'charta ve'otanu tidashta im kol hamim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava v'ratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat L'chaim.
And Julia's going to help us hold our challah up high.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem haaretz. Amen. La 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 la. Shabbat shalom,
Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom,
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Good Shabbos, friends.